done so many time skips. I honestly wish we would have been able to sit with Harwin Strong, because you introduce him, and then she's already had 2 kids by him. You know, it's like I would have liked to have seen scenes so that we could have gotten attached to him more, so that when he dies at Harrenhal, it's a lot more impactful. Because, like, you get introduced to him, and then he dies. And then we're supposed to believe Rhaenyra. And I'm like, yeah, she is, but we should have been able to sit with her. Gotten flashbacks. Like, I definitely think we should have gotten flashbacks or have been able to sit with him for a couple episodes, at least of their relationship. Because we get introduced to them, there's hints that they're together, and then he dies. All within, like, an episode or 2. And it's like, we should have been able to, like, get attached to him a little bit more as an audience member. Just so we could feel that impact. And then I kind of wished that, we got more scenes of, like, Rhaenyra kind of being like, hey, Otto's being fucking weird again. Like, he's following me, he's doing whatever. Like, I think we should have gotten more of that. And also more of Otto planning. Because we see him kind of making plans, and then the full plan we get, this man's usurping the throne. And it's like, I think we should have seen him at Hightower, or like High Garden, going, oh, we're gonna do this. Like, this is how we're gonna usurp the throne, this is how we're gonna take it, and then cut back to the scene where, you know, Viserys is telling Rhaenyra about the long night.
Oh yeah.
Like, we should have been able to see him planning treachery instead of jumping from he's kicked out to he's back in the game. And then what? Like, I would have loved to have seen his actual planning, so that when we saw him doing, oh, you have to bend the knee and you have to do all of this, you could be like, oh no, he's actually putting it into fruition. Like, he's actually starting.
There is not a ton of cards in this round that give me extra action.
Oh, really?
That's rough.
Ooh.
Border village. Let's get some border villages in here, jeez. And which? Why not?
Kinda.
Let's play some border village strats, I guess.
Border village strats.
Yeah, the season finale is so interesting. You know, it just made me so interested to see what's going to come of season 2, because you know, a lot of it is this, like, you know, and this is sort of the whole theme, right? Is like build up, build up, build up. Shit's getting worse. You know, tragedy is striking. You know, like everything's just falling apart. People are getting more distrustful and hateful of each other, right? And so, yeah, you know, so it's like, ooh, what's gonna happen in season 2? It's just kind of right now. It's still that, like, you know, pressure cooker. It's still like we're getting scarier and scarier.
I think the first episode of season 2 is definitely gonna be like right off the bat. I definitely think that there's gonna be, like, I mean, for us it's gonna be a couple of years, let's be honest, but yeah, like for the story wise, I think it's going to go exactly, I think it's gonna pick up like almost instantaneous. Like, okay, they just they just, you know, they just found out he's dead. And so now we're gonna see,
Whoops.
and it's not great. Because Helena and her kids have nothing to do with it. It's Aegon. But he's kind of in the mentality of, you killed my son, so I'm gonna kill yours. And I never liked children being brought into it. So in that sense, I'm kind of like, you didn't have to do that. Like, you just could have, like, killed some advisors, you know?
Yeah.
You didn't have to kill the children, but they do, and...
But he's an anti-hero in an already morally ambivalent, like, storyline, so
it's like, I understand, and I'm gonna be honest, like, if I was in the boat of Rhaenyra, and all of this, because let's also remember, she loses her dad, she loses her daughter, and then her half-brother takes what's rightfully hers, all within a day.
Yeah.
She does not have time to breathe. And then the very next day, I assume, given the time, she loses her son. So I kind of am like, if I was in the same boat, blood and cheese wouldn't sound too bad.
I won!
Hell yeah!
Holy crap, 2 rounds later.
And I'll show Ryan after this, the blood and cheese thing, because I don't... It's very interesting. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if I would have said no to the blood and cheese. Like, if I put myself in the shoes of Rhaenyra, I probably would have been like, hey, an eye for an eye, let's go Bible style.
Bible style?
You know, like, let's fucking Old Testament this shit.
Right.
You know, and so that's, I think, one of the powerful things of storytelling is that, like, when you go into it, you're like, I may not have been the person, you know, because everyone's like, I would never. You know, when you talk about historical events, they're like, I would never have done this.
Right.
I never. And it's like, you don't know if you wouldn't have, though.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, like, this is the thing, right? People, because everyone has something to gain. Because here's the thing, generally speaking, across time, and this is just kind of a true thing even to our contemporary real-life world, what makes things so complicated is everyone has something to gain from things falling apart a little bit, and everyone has something to gain from the current status quo of things, right? There's always going to be something to gain from how things are right now, and there's always kind of going to be something to gain if things kind of get the pot stirred, you know, and things heat up a bit.
Yeah.
And then what happens is when such things actually come knocking at your doorstep, it's like, oh crap, because there's so many different ways in which things could fall apart or things could stay the same and you could gain and you could lose, that when that actually happens in your life and things come to that kind of peripety, then it's like, oh, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because, like, you know, we talk about, you know, because people were talking about morality and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, this action makes me look at, like, Rhaenyra differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, true, that's a very fair statement. But would you, in your shoes, like, have done it differently? Would you have, you know, would still want retribution, whether it was through Helena and her kids, or, like, just kill Helena?
Yeah. Because with all this, you know, and this was obviously, of course, how Game of Thrones played it too, right? Like, the story is about things falling apart and how what moves people will make to think that they're going to gain, you know?
Yeah.
That's the whole politics of it. But it's like, of course, it's like collapse politics. It's like, oh, crap's falling apart. How can I actually come out on top, you know?
Which, you know, is very, very interesting, I think.
And then you made an interesting point where, like, you know, like, well, it's like technically, as all this stuff is happening, you know, and kings are dying and falling apart, and princes and princesses and so on are ascending thrones.
I think when you especially when we talk about characters and such, and something as great as Game of Thrones, you know, let's be honest. I think people they're like, oh well, I wouldn't have done X, or I would have done this, or I would have done that. And
Yeah,
it's kind of
and-
like, it's so easy for you to say that because you're not in that morally gray area, and you're also not the person.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's like the only way I think that sort of I would have done something differently attitude is actually seemingly valid is if they just were compelled by different things than the characters were. But either way, you're making moves based off of something you're compelled by. You're not compelled by something, right? You're always sort of looking out for your interests, or, you know, the interests of your family, but that is obviously your interests by proxy.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think, it's interesting to discuss morality in terms of Game of Thrones because there is so much, like, grayness. There is so much of it that is not morally good, and very much exists in the space that Daemon exists in, which is neither good nor bad. And I think that we also forget that, and maybe it's just women characters in general, but I think people expect mothers in Game of Thrones to be very, praised, if that makes sense. Because Cersei was kind of praised.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Catelyn Stark, to an extent, was kind of praised. My name is...
Well, and she's much more crazed in the books.
And she's much more crazed in the books because she actually comes back.
Oh, yeah. It's actually sort of... See, because I always... When I found that out, I thought that would have been so cool to see in the show. And now, apparently, a lot of people are you know, commenting on YouTube shorts about it. And are saying, yeah, actually, if that had been in the show, that would have made Jon Snow's resurrection look less spontaneous. And they, of course, you know, said more choice words than that. But yeah, they were like, oh, actually, if that had been in the show, that would have given more credence to what could have happened to Jon, and what did happen to Jon. So.
Yeah, I definitely think that had she been in, a lot of things would have changed. Bran possibly would have died sooner. Or...
Oh, that's so interesting, though, because I would have been so interested to see, like, I still would have been interested to see a Brienne versus Hound, but I almost wonder if that could have been better, though, because when Brienne defeats the Hound, that totally just fucks up, you know, Arya's and Hound's relationship. And because for some reason Game of Thrones does this thing in, like, Season 7 and Season 8 where everyone kind of goes back to being, like, enemies again, you know?
Which is
where all the relationships kind of unravel.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest, I like Sansa as a character. Don't call me a Sansa hater. But I also got really annoyed sometimes with how she was. Just because I felt like when Daenerys comes on the board, I know everyone's like, well, she's mistrustworthy, that's what the North does. And I'm like, you're completely... And with House of Dragon being a thing, it's like you completely forget that House Stark and House Targaryen were friends. That they, like, had things. Hold on, I'm gonna...
Oh, you're holding on. Holding on.
Like, you forget that they used to have a bond of some sort, an alliance. And so I think that they wrote Sansa to be such a jealous, like, person.
Mhm.
Like, it was really weird. I'm like, you're supposed to be smart. How does you not seeing a woman with a dragon help you get what you want?